The article describes a study looking at behaviours and opinions of web users in a set of specific situations relating to saving, sharing, and removing intellectual property on the social web. The aim is to understand the social norms that have developed among web users surrounding these actions, and to view how they may differ from the legal guidelines. The study covers many highly relevant current topics, such as the reuse of social data for advertising and the removal of content from social media by someone other than the original poster. But why is this a useful topic to study and understand? Firstly, social media has changed how we use the web. Creation of content is much more accessible to the masses, and while platforms such as Facebook, Twitter and YouTube allow users to share more and more of their content and their lives on the web. These platforms also facilitate sharing and interaction with other users' content, for example, retweeting, commenting and Twitter threads. A more complex example of these interactions is parody videos on YouTube. In general, content ownership on the web is becoming more and more complex, and the increasingly social environment raises many new challenges for intellectual property laws. Reuse of user-generated content is the most difficult topic. We can consider the situation where content goes viral on the web. When a photo, for example, is being shared by thousands of users, it's very easy to lose track of who the original creator was. In this case, the idea of asking the creator for permission for reuse is very difficult. This can cause difficulties. For example, what if an organization wanted to profit off the popularity of a viral post to advertise their brand, but they cannot track down the original creator? In this case, it's possible that the American idea of fair use might be applied. Fair use states that copyrighted content can be reused without the owner's permission, depending on certain factors, such as what the content is and the purpose of reuse, with commercial reuse being the most controversial case. However, this law is ambiguous and very subjective, so it doesn't really provide a solution to intellectual property laws on the web. We cannot consider every possible copyright infringement on a case-by-case basis. Another issue with copyright law on the web is that the web is international and users can be anywhere in the world, while the platforms they use may not be based in the same country as them. But copyright law is generally country-specific, so it's difficult to know which legislation is actually relevant. Ultimately, it's clear that the legal guidelines are not keeping up with the ever-changing landscape of the web. While this study does not seek to solve this problem, it does aim to understand the social norms and how users actually use the web, with the idea that this may help to develop more appropriate legislation in the future.
Yeah, then it's okay.
Okay, so you can do the slides
Yeah.
and be
Okay.
ready to go.
The media-specific studies help to understand the people's attitudes about the ownerships and control of user-contributed content. Moreover, these scenarios help to explore media-independent features. Including original content, this feature refers to whether the content's original context influenced the participants' perceptions of ownership rights. The second one, the user relationships to content. This feature tests some of the complexity of ownerships. As an example, if it changes the rights perceptions to save a photo if it's the photographer or the person in the photo. The third one is the commercial concerns. This considers the user's understanding of corporate ownership rights as well as commercial use by individuals, apart from any terms and conditions spelled out by the service. The fourth one is the germ-derived properties. Some content might have properties that raise specific expectations about associated rights. For example, an in-game chat session or other forms of communication. The fifth, desegregation. This tests whether the rights to elemental parts of an item are different than the rights of the whole item. This could be like the audio track of a video within inert ownership. To the participants, the saving is the most benign action the scenario explores. As a remark, in the survey, this distinguishes the scenarios between saving for performance and saving from reuse. Another two aspects of saving that is impose a limit to the participants are the cloud storage and the limit. The first one, rather than the internal storage, it is considered to never be under user control, and also that service provider terms and conditions might apply to this. As for limits, this is that people expect to be able to download much of what they encounter online. The result confirmed that participants feel that individuals should be able to save anything they find on the internet to local storage, regardless of whether the content is published on the open web or shared on a social media service, as long as the content is public. To give a bit of interpretation to the results, the study shows that participants respect explicit boundaries set by social connections. While it seems acceptable to save any content on the open web, once one is inside Facebook, different rules apply. The Part 1b contrasts one's right to save one's own profile and friends list with the right to save the equivalent content to other friends. Two weaker effects also appear in the results. The first one is the participants feel that local storage is more private than cloud storage. And the second one, some are uncomfortable with the idea that the conversation might be recorded and stored locally for an unspecified period. It is important to mention that reuse is one of the more contentious aspects of current legal interpretation of copyright and fair use. The reuse scenarios examined another three more, a part of the 5 previous aspects. The first one is the public good. This feature seeks a balance between individual rights and the public interest, such as the right to store, access, and reuse historical content. The second one is the permission. The study revealed that some thought permission is the essential bridge to fair use, although a legal approach to fair use does not require one to seek or obtain permission. The third one is the venue and purpose. This was studied in different contexts, such as user-contributed content reused as data. This is a common practice as personal information is analyzed to draw conclusions about users as a group or as a target for advertising. To give a bit of interpretation to the graph, the second A shows that more than 84% of the participants disagree with the premise that the reuse of information is within the server's rights. Reuse for social good, let's say for second A, shows that more than the 84% of the participants disagree with the premise that the reuse information is within the service rights. Reuse for social good is viewed more skeptically than reuse for humorous content. Either way, people are increasingly aware of what they give up when they publish profiles that describe themselves. In addition to preventing privacy loss, people also seek for control over their digital identities. As for removing, participants generally did not support the idea of removing someone else's contents in one's own selfish interests. In general, the results of the studies reveal how far public attitudes have stayed from conventional legal concepts and how much they are tied to media type and other circumstantial factors. Among the highlights of the findings are 5 recurring social norms. The first one is to save anything but respect explicit social constraints. This is the case in Facebook. Ownership's effects are stronger inside social network services than they are outside on the open web. The second one is the concern for control of self-permission. People feel a strong right to own and control their own digital footprints, regardless of the service of this content. The third one is the reuse norm reflects some aspects of fair use and ignore others. Original intent and original content are part of calculus and circumstantial fairness. The fourth one is a right to veracity. The removing and bland self-interest of content falls under this rubric. And for the last one is the highly circumstantial reasoning about reuse. Social norms seem to have outsider effect on participants' perception of what they can do with user-contributed content. Social norms are often non-reciprocal in actions. Participants do not always apply the same standards to themselves that they do to others, especially in non-abstract practical situations. Some gaps between desired policy and current social norm might be bridged through education and thought design. Social norms seem to have outsider effect on participants' perception of what they can do with user-contributed content. Social norms are often non-reciprocal in actions. Participants do not always apply the same standards to themselves that they do to others, especially in non-abstract practical situations. Some gaps between desired policy and current social norm might be bridged through education and thought design.
While there are no direct algorithmic issues discussed in the study, there are algorithmic issues to do with the area of data and social media. The data on these platforms is used to create predictive models about what its users will do in the future. This can be something like predicting which products its users will like. What this predictive data is used for will affect people's feelings about it and the social norms. People might be quite comfortable with a company predicting whether you will respond to an advert that they have placed or not. Recently, worries have been raised about these techniques being used in a way that can influence people's political decisions and undermine the democratic process. Also, we might feel differently about this data being used to impact the price that we have to pay for car insurance, or even the data that we post on Facebook predicting whether we're likely to repay a mortgage loan, so this could affect our mortgage rates and loan rates. We might not be quite at the minority report level where this data is used to be extremely accurate in predicting future behaviour, but people will be worried, particularly with the gap between people's understanding of how these technology works. There are some areas that the study didn't consider. One is the effect that the subjects of the data will likely affect people's feelings about it. For example, people are likely to feel differently about data that's held about children, or people who are vulnerable, or people who are mentally ill. People may also feel different about people making mistakes when they are young and how long this data should be held. Should this be something that people can never forget, or if you make a mistake when you're 16, is it reasonable for that to be forgotten? Also, people's professional roles will affect their reasonable usage of data and how they should interact with it. It seems right that journalists should be able to reuse and adapt content that's already existing on social media to better get to the truth of what's happening. People, though, may be worried about this and concerned about voyeurism. Also, it seems common sense that security services, anti-terrorist groups will want to be able to use this data. There'll also be privacy concerns with that. In summary, there is a large gap between the current legal situation and social norms. This is probably because of the fast pace of change of this new technology, which makes it difficult for the legal system to keep up. Also, social norms are affected by different levels of technological understanding and the complexity of some of these systems. This is why it's an interesting area of study, and no doubt the debate will continue.